Welcome to Faculty Authored Books. We're here at Greenwood Library at Longwood University in beautiful Farmville, Virginia. We spotlight and showcase the amazing research by Longwood faculty and staff. My name is Brent Roberts, and I'm the Dean of Greenwood Library here at Longwood University. And I am very happy to say that today we'll be talking about this book, Speech-Language Pathologists as Expert Witnesses by Dr. Brenda Chafin Seal and Dr. Lissa Power-deFur. Dr. Brenda Seal is a retired professor and director of speech-language pathology at Gallaudet University and is professor emerita of communication sciences and disorders at James Madison University. She's received many awards throughout her career for teaching and research and is a fellow of the Speech Language Hearing Association of Virginia and of the American Speech Language Hearing Association. Through her work in a variety of clinical and classroom settings, Brenda has actually been an expert witness in due process hearings as well as various criminal and civil litigation cases. So we're excited to hear about that. Dr. Lissa Power-deFur is professor of communication sciences and disorders at Longwood University. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Go Lancers. She has also received many awards and distinctions in her field and is also a fellow of the American Speech Language Hearing Association and of the Speech Language Hearing Association of Virginia. She currently serves as interim dean of the College of Education and Human Services here at Longwood University. So Lissa, Brenda, we are so excited to have you both here today and excited to hear more about your book. And in preparation, I just read John Grisham's book, The Reckoning. I love a good courtroom drama. And I'm interested to hear how speech-language pathologists work as expert witnesses. So to get us kicked off, why don't you tell us a little bit about how this book came together? I'm especially interested to know what it's like to collaborate. And I mean, writing is often difficult enough when it's just one person. How do you make it work when there's two of you?
Shall I begin, Lissa?
Absolutely, Brenda. I love the story about how this was created.
Through the years and having served as an expert witness, I would go to our research literature to find guidance and found nothing, very little. So it occurred to me after a 4 or 5 year period that this needs to be documented. We need to have something for the profession that could guide others, or at least expose the practice. Expert witnessing is part of our speech language pathology scope of practice. So just serving, exposing that to the greater public and to our colleagues seemed to be a first step. And as fortune often has it, Lissa and I were we were in a bus together at one of our national conferences. I'm not sure if we were speaking together, Lissa, at that point, or if we were just enjoying each other's company as friends.
Yep, I think we were just visiting as old friends.
I think that's true. And Lissa said, I've been real busy, Brenda, and I know she always is busy. Recently, I've been asked to serve as an expert witness, and I was thrilled to hear that. And I said, Lissa, I've started a book on serving as an expert witness, and I sure would love to have a collaborator on this book. Knowing two things, knowing one, that Lissa's expertise in any area that she has pursued has always exceeded expectations of most of us, never mind because I know she's a consummate researcher and practitioner. So I knew Lissa's work would be exceptional. I also feared, though, that because of her responsibilities at Longwood and personal responsibilities at church that she wouldn't have the time. So, and secondly, Lissa's background in ethics is another tribute, and she has served as our National Vice President of Ethics and Ethical Issues for the American Speech Language Hearing Association. And so much of serving, so much of this scope of practice piece is linked to ethical decision making. So for those two reasons, I was hopeful that Lissa would agree to collaborate with me on this book. And guess what? Lissa.
Yeah. Prior to coming to Longwood, I had worked at the Virginia Department of Education for many years in special education and student services, and had a lot of connections to the special education regulations, worked closely with colleagues in due process hearings and complaints. And so, whereas Brenda has had a lot of experience in the courtroom, my experience is a little bit more in the area of special education. So it really became a nice connection where our expertises really matched one another. Brent, you asked about writing together. I think that the nicest benefit about this at the beginning was that we had a reason to get together for dinner. And so Brenda lives in Harrisonburg, I live in Richmond, so we'd meet in Charlottesville and have a lovely evening. And unfortunately, we didn't get as much done as we intended, but it was a lovely opportunity for friendships to develop. Developed a proposal, reached out to Asha Press about it, and that's kind of what moved it from a good idea that Brenda was writing on to, I would say, inspiring me to have, oh, it's a deadline. I need to work on my part now. I can't just think about it. I really appreciate the opportunity to work with Brenda. The style in this is Brenda's style. The presentation of cases, kind of that conversational approach. And that was a great opportunity for me to develop a more conversational style in writing, which was another benefit to me. And so I often felt that I was the first reviewer, that I'd read the chapter Brenda wrote, I'd add my part, I'd reflect on it, I'd ask some questions about it. And I think it just made it a stronger book.
That's great. Well, you mentioned that you took the case study approach. And that's one thing that I found just fascinating in this book was all the different varieties of cases. So could you talk about that for a moment? What kinds of cases do speech language pathologists get to be a part of?
Wow, it's relatively unlimited. Because my background is in deafness and pediatric and adult hearing loss, most of the cases that I've been involved in, not all, but most, have involved individuals who use sign language. So you're really skilled in the educational bent, the direction of cases in schools.
I think that you will often find as something is going to a special ed complaint process, whether a complaint or a due process hearing, the complaint being reviewed at the Department of Education, or a due process hearing where you have a hearing officer, that an expert witness may be needed to be an independent voice, reviewing the records, evaluating the child independently and offering that opinion. And then it is the final decision of the due process hearing officer to make a decision. Although neither Brenda and I have had these experiences, we've talked to colleagues that their specialty is working with adults post-stroke, post-brain injury. And they have been invited to speak to the competence of somebody to, regardless whether it is a criminal or a civil case, because of their knowledge of the impact of the brain injury on language and on cognition.
Yeah.
That was actually one of my questions. I'm glad you mentioned that, Lissa. One of the examples from the book, one of the cases involved a brain injury of a young man on a cruise ship. And so my question to follow up on that and what you were just saying, so under what circumstances is a speech language pathologist then called as an expert witness? Would an SLP be called in addition to an MD, or do they work together? What's the relationship there?
In best practice, it would be a collaborative effort, but expert witnesses can't influence the work of an MD, and an MD can't influence the work of an expert witness. It's the attorney, and the attorney representing a client who merges the information from these individuals. And I was watching the national news the other night, Lissa, Brent. The case of George Floyd and his death. Two expert witnesses on two opposing sides, two medical examiners, two pathologists, and pathology refers to disease. In our case, it can be disorders, communication disorders or diseases, the consequence of communication breakdowns or loss or delays, developmental. Communication was never developed or was developed with disabilities. So these two expert witnesses gave two very different opinions about George Floyd's death. And one that he died from anoxia, lack of oxygen to the brain. And the other had a different bent on that same diagnosis. So in the cases of dispute, and that's what all of these expert witnesses are about, where we, if we're asked, and any SLP across the country would be addressing speech, language, hearing, or swallowing disorders. Can you add to that, Lissa?
No, that's the perfect answer for that, Brenda.
Great. I don't know that I've ever seen an SLP as an expert witness on Law and Order or in a John Grisham book. Have they appeared that you're aware?
I don't think so. Yeah.
I don't think so.
I think we've got ourselves an opportunity here.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, I think that you're most likely to see it pop up, but it's probably going to go to a medical doctor with somebody post-brain injury, with somebody who is deaf. And I think that filtering down to the level of speech language pathologist is probably not what our Hollywood writers are thinking about.
Probably not. Although I was involved in a case, it was a very large federal case with a man who claimed that his rights were denied for an interpreter. He also was an immigrant, and this gentleman was an excellent speech reader, excellent lip reader. And I was called in to determine how well he lip read, how well he could understand. And that's a pretty easy task. You give language, make a few statements that are related to the defendant's case or the prosecutor's case. And that language, it's not a casual everyday greetings and closings. And that's what he did well with. He did not speech read or lip read the nightly news or courtroom
language. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're just about out of time, but one more question. May is Better Hearing and Speech Month. So can you tell us why is that so important and what can we do to celebrate?
Well, I think that your example about the fact that we don't see speech language pathologists or audiologists in John Grisham's books or on these crime TV shows is a good example of how the fields are still not very well understood. They've been around for about 100 years, but as I listen to folks that are thinking about the field of speech language pathology as their Longwood students, well, I didn't know anything about it until, so it's still not a very well-known profession. And that means that it's not very well known that we are there to serve so many different individuals, that from infancy through hospice care, speech language pathologists have an important role to play in terms of communication, from speech development to language development to cognitive skills to the comfort of swallowing, perhaps in those final days of a person's life. And then our colleagues in audiology, what a critical role they play in enabling persons with hearing loss to be able to access communication with others. So Brenda, how would you add to that?
I'm going to add a word or two about Lissa. Longwood didn't have a speech language pathology or communication sciences and disorders program until Lissa initiated the effort. We had UVA's, JMU's, Radford's, Old Dominion's, and Hampton's programs were the 5. And Lissa began, she spearheaded a move to develop
with
an
a team.
Well, you spearheaded. I think you were the sole mover and shaker on this, Lissa, but you couldn't have done it without an adequate team and the support of the university and the administrative support of the State Department of Higher Ed, SCHEV, and the university support. But Lissa saw a need. SLP by 2029, it's the 4th most growing field as we're aging and as babies survive complex medical disorders, as the immigrant population continues to boost the diversity of our world as we know it. Speech language pathologists are fundamental to the roles we play in so many people's lives. So putting that word out, talking to John Grisham when you have dinner with him next time, Brent.
I'll be sure to mention that.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate that plug. Maybe
we should send him a book.
We should. Well, their book is Speech Language Pathologists as Expert Witnesses. We've had a great conversation today with Dr. Brenda Seal and Dr. Lissa Power-deFur. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for watching. And we'll see you next time on Greenwood Library's Focus on Faculty Authored Books, the fabulous books.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it. Bye.
Bye-bye.